everyone. Greetings from the Sculpture Studio. Today I want to talk to you about time and how time affects our musical perception. I wanted to first start with a personal note about time. When you're blind and you have to walk on your own on the street, one of the first skills that you need to learn in terms of mobility and orientation is what is called time distance estimate. In other words, you need to be aware of how far you have walked and how much time has passed. Because let's say you're walking on a longer street block and you need to at some point turn to find an entrance. Well, then it's very important for you to kind of know how much time has passed and how far you've traveled to start to gauge when it's time to turn. Or when you're crossing a street, same thing. You need to know when you can expect the corner at the other side. And if you don't find that corner, then you know that you'll better recheck your alignment so you can get out of the street. So that's my personal insight about time and the role it can play in my daily life. But let's get back to music. The three things I want to focus on today are tempo, choosing the right tempo for a piece, timing of rhythm, so how much freedom or how little should be used, and how do we use rubato expressively, and finally timing in terms of coordination and when is the right time to make which movement of our hands, and thinking ahead and preparation. These are all things that pertain actually to time, to choosing the right time for things. So firstly, tempo. And here somebody asked me, how do you choose the right tempo for a piece? And I think there are a few aspects that come into play. The first one is the character of the piece, the stylistic, the context, the musical context of when it was written, what did the composer write in terms of tempo. So for example, if somebody says presto, then obviously you'll play fast. But how fast is fast and how slow is slow, that depends on how the music makes sense to us. Let's say, how slow can you play and still keep the phrases connected, and the longer the phrase, the harder it is to make a long phrase in a very slow tempo. There are conductors that play in very slow tempos and can still make it interesting because their phrasing is so perfectly controlled that you just get very focused on every note. The other opposite is also, if you're playing fast, even if your technique allows it, but you cannot follow what you play with your ears, then it is too fast. I had a piano teacher who told me it doesn't matter if your hands can play fast if your mind can't keep track. So, for example, this is a piece that I find it's such a tempting piece to play fast because it fits in our fingers. It's the third movement by La Catedral by Agustín Barrios. And here it's very tempting to kind of run away with it. But I mean, it sounds interesting and there is something exciting about this kind of tempo. However, if you look at the score and you realize that Barrios did write Allegro solemne, then, if you're going to play solemn, you can't really be chasing around this third movement. So then you have to find a character that fits the composer's indication. At the end of this little fragment that I played, I actually did something that brings me to the next aspect of my talk today, and that's rubato, or in other words, liberty in tempo. How do we use it? When do we use it? How much do we use? I think that rubato is a very interesting thing. It reminds me actually of speaking. When we speak, we accelerate, we decelerate, and music does it also. And sometimes you want to do it in a way that people don't even notice that you're doing it, but it just they will notice that there is a natural flow. For example, if there's an important note that you want to stick out in the music, you can play it louder or with a different color, but you can also make it slightly longer, like in this fragment that I just played. So I stayed longer on this F sharp because it's like I reached the top of a mountain. I'm going to sit here and enjoy the view a little bit. Another way to think of rubato, and this is of course dependent on the type of music you're playing, because the type of rubato that you'll use for Bach or for, let's say, Regondi, so is very different. So from Baroque to Romanticism, our sense of tempo and the liberties we can take is different. So one of them would be like using rubato to accentuate notes or harmonies to give us just a little more time. Then another one is using breath, and our body is often a very nice indicator of natural rubato. When there is a phrase that's over, whether we speak or whether we play, we will often take a breath before we start something new. And it actually is really physically important to sometimes breathe after the end of the phrase, especially when we're on stage and we're nervous. Remembering to breathe naturally will hopefully help us bring our body back into a more grounded state of being that will help us not rush and not let our nerves alter our perception of time to the point where we're getting ahead of ourselves. So that's about rubato. I don't want to get into stylistic considerations. Basically, in Baroque music, whatever liberty you take, you have to make it so that the overall tempo still remains stable. So you can always maintain a constant beat. Whereas in more romantic music, the whole thing can accelerate or decelerate. So that brings me to the next part of my reflections on time. And here I want to thank Karen Ellison. She's a supporter of mine on Buy Me a Coffee, and she asked about cross-string trills. This is a tongue twister. Cross-string trills. So cross-string trills is a trill that you do on two adjacent strings. Why do I want to talk about these trills here? What does this have to do with time? It's because you cannot do these well unless you have a very good understanding of the movements and when you need to do them. And the key for me is preparation. You have to think ahead so that the next finger is always ready to play the next note. So in this case, I'm using A, I, M key for my fingering. And as I play the A finger, the I finger is immediately ready to play the next string. As I play the I, the M is ready. M is ready, and now the thumb is ready to play. So it's kind of like when you walk, you always have one foot on the ground. So you want to make sure that you practice it slowly and really are able to prepare each finger right as the other one is playing. Once this is clear and your hand is always stable, there is never a moment where it's kind of floating in the air, then we can consider speeding this up. Another thing to realize is that we rarely need to play these type of trills for a very long time. So, you know, it's very rare to have going on for a very long time. So it's often like just... And so it's very useful to practice speed bursts. So when you're practicing for speed, I think it's important. We tend to, as the longer it goes, the more we tend to tense up. So then it's interesting to start at a louder tempo, but then decrescendo. Ta-da-da-da, ta-da-da-da, ta-da-da-da. Not to always play it that way in a piece, but it helps you when you're practicing technique to stay loose and stay relaxed. So ta-da-da-da, ta-da-da-da. In the case of a trill, actually, it makes sense to play ta-da-da-da, because it's very rare that, in fact, it's very important not to give an accent on that last note of the trill, because really the important note that is the dissonance, the B in this case, and so even musically here it makes sense to do a bit of decrescendo, because this is the resolution note. Ta, tension, ta, resolution. So that's why it's really doesn't make sense, although our thumb is a very strong finger, we have to guard ourselves from going and give a big accent at the end of the trill. So speed bursts played in decrescendo makes sense. But all has to be built on the idea of preparation, of thinking ahead and preparing ahead your right hand. This is actually preparation brings me to the next thing of preparation of both hands in whatever we play, and that's great for practicing coordination of the two hands. And again here, the timing of the movement, they need to really move at the same time. So how do I practice this? For example, in a chromatic scale, so what I'm doing is that instead of playing just a normal scale, which is fluid and legato, I am preparing, but not only my right hand, but the left hand. So as my right hand finger prepares and touches the string, the next finger of the left hand is also doing this. And the same thing with shifts. So as I prepare the right hand finger, I'm doing the shift. And in fact, I always like to imagine when I'm practicing shifts this way, when I'm right before the shift, my whole body and my hand is almost feeling like it's being pulled by an elastic to go towards the destination of my shift. So if I have a very good sensation in my body, so basically in my feeling in my body, I'm already feeling myself where I want to get. And then when I let go, it's almost like I'm just being released to go there, rather than thinking, oh, now I have to give it a kick to get to this note. I'm just releasing it, and then it goes right where it needs to go. Preparation, I cannot stress it enough. It's a tool that's good for so many reasons. First of all, it practices coordination between your hands, and it gives you the chance to practice in a paradoxical way fast while you're playing slowly. So you're doing fast movements, but in a slow tempo. You're playing tricks on time so that you can improve your timing skills. Then what it also does is it makes sure that you're very aware of the notes of your piece of music. So it's very good for memorization, because you always need to think ahead, and your hands need to know at any particular moment what comes next. So then if you should have a bit of a memory blank and you don't remember how it sounds, hopefully you have this other lifeline of your fingers that always know what's coming ahead. So especially I like to practice this when you have a piece that has many series of notes of the same value, like the cathedral third movement, for example. So as I play the first note, I'm always preparing a step ahead. It's very interesting also for scales, you know. So you will notice that some notes are long and some notes are short. So this can be a bit confusing musically, but our goal is not to play every note short or every note long. It's just to prepare the coming note. So if this happens to shorten a note, that's fine. If it makes the other note, just lets it ring, that's also fine. So the length of notes is secondary here. What's important is preparing in a coordinated way both hands. So I hope that this answered some of the questions that people were asking me about tempo, about crossing trills, and that you have some new tools in your toolbox about practicing coordination, practicing preparation, about memorization. And so I hope that you enjoyed this talk, and looking forward to talking to you soon.